Hey gamers, so now that we know officially from Nintendo that the Switch 2 is called the Switch 2, I want to talk about what this means for Nintendo going forward for the next couple of years. Like, is this the end of unique Nintendo consoles or not? So let's just get right into it, shall we? So what do I mean by unique Nintendo consoles? Well, I mean when Nintendo does something completely radically different, where they change the name and like console design of the next console. Now, before I get any comments about this, I know Nintendo has technically done sequels before to their successful consoles. I mean, the NES, the SNES, the Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, DS, 3DS, they have had sequels to their successful stuff before, but Nintendo has never had a number after the name. The 3DS is kind of different because it's before a name and also it references the 3D stuff, but they never called it the DS2 or whatever. There's never been a number after the console, unlike this time where it's actually called the Switch 2. So it makes me wonder, is Nintendo done with like these type of unique consoles? We're just gonna keep seeing Switches forever. Because here's the thing. If they just called it the Super Switch or Switch Advance, whatever, which was a lot of people's hopes that they would call this console for Nintendo. Heck, even myself, I was a big fan of the Super Switch. I think that would have been a cool name to call it. But if they did, I think we could just expect that to be the only successor to the Switch. Like, we wouldn't be expecting like a third version of the Switch, because what would you call that? The same thing goes for like the other consoles. What do you call a successor to the Super NES? Super Duper NES? That's a little bit weird. Nintendo has never done like a third console in the same line, right? And again, before I get comments about this, technically we have the Game Boy Color as well, but that's like kind of considered in Nintendo's eyes at least to be a pro version of the Game Boy, the original version, even though some people see it as like a first successor to the Game Boy. Either way, in Nintendo's eyes, they see it as one thing. The Game Boy Color is one console. So my point still stands that we never really would have had an indication that Nintendo would go beyond two consoles, iterating, But with the Switch 2 literally being called the Switch 2, does that mean that Nintendo is done with this, because it got me thinking, dude. I see people make jokes about, oh, when are we gonna get Switch 3, Switch 4, or whatever, but that is actually a good conversation, because I think the number does imply that Nintendo at least plans to do, more Switches, going forward. Now, will they actually stick with it? I don't know, because it does truly depend on how much the console sells. Like, if the Switch 2 doesn't sell that well, maybe Nintendo will not do a Switch 3. No, I think they will at the very least do a Switch 3, and maybe after that they'll do something different, because of the fact that these big companies, Nintendo, Xbox, PlayStation, they're always working on the next console, like years, even before the current console's out, they're always working on the next big thing. But I think there's at least guarantee that they will have plans for Switch 3. It's after the fact, like Switch 4, like if it doesn't still sell well, like the Switch 3, maybe Nintendo will go back to doing unique random consoles or whatever. But I think this at least shows their intentions that they want to fully make the Switch, a continuous thing, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, but it is kind of weird for Nintendo, because I'm so used to them doing, different consoles every time, and even if they do sequels to their consoles, it's still, a unique thing, like, I mean, the Game Boy Advance, I mean, it had a different form factor originally, at least, and even, with its redesign, it still had a slightly different form factor with the clamshell design. It looked a little bit different from the original Game Boy, and I'm gonna, kind of miss that, but at the same time, I do think this was Nintendo's plan all along. I think their plan was to combine their, home console and their handheld markets into one thing, so it could get a bunch of games on both platforms. They don't have to spread them apart, they don't have to divide their viewer base or whatever. It's all just one console, and I think this is what Nintendo was hoping to do for a while. You kind of saw this a lot, especially the 3DS and Wii U days, where there was a lot of games that were ported to especially the 3DS. Obviously, that part of it was because the Wii U was not doing well, but you could kind of see their mindset where it kind of works similarly, especially because of the dual screens, on 3DS and Wii U. You kind of had compatible games across the board. Also, you saw DS games be on the Virtual Console for Wii U. So like you kind of saw elements of this already, but now it's just in full force with the Switch, and I think that's a good thing. I know some people are like, oh, they missed the dedicated home consoles for Nintendo. They missed the dedicated handheld consoles because of this and that. But I think this is the better solution, and I think the numbering of the Switch 2 really proves that this will at least continue to some extent for a little while. Again, I think maybe if the Switch 2 or like the next Switch or whatever starts not selling well, I think I could see Nintendo doing something a little bit different. But even then, I don't think they will ever go back to doing separate handheld and console systems. I think they will just continue iterating on the Switch. And the Switch name in itself is a perfect way to describe, going between handheld and home console gaming. I think this at least shows that they're going to continue the Switch name for a really long time. Maybe they'll switch it up. I know some people are like, oh, why didn't they call the Switch 2 the Nintendo Snap because it kind of snaps or whatever. But I think Nintendo is in a different place because of the fact that one, the market is different. We're so much more used to like pro consoles that calling the thing like Super Switch or whatever would confuse people. So Switch 2 makes the most sense. And two, because the Switch did so successful for Nintendo and it hasn't lost momentum like that much, with the Wii that was successful as well, but that's why they made the Wii U. But the momentum fell off a cliff like after like 4 years or something like that. Like it fell off really quick. So by the time they introduced the Wii U, one, horrible name, even though I love the system, but two, it was already low on momentum from the Wii, so it didn't really carry over. But with the Switch 2, there's still momentum for the Switch. People have been begging for just a more powerful Switch. Their games are still releasing for the current Switch. There's still good sales, so I think Nintendo sees that and they just want to continue it. They want to keep that brand synergy, which is a big thing. They want to get consumers to be like, oh, this is the next big thing, and calling it like Super Switch get people thinking that it's just like a pro console, and so they don't need it really. Or if they call it something different but still have the Switch idea there where you go between handheld and home console gaming, like the Nintendo Snap, it just gives people the wrong impression that it's like something completely different, even though it might functionally be the same thing as the original Switch. So I can see Nintendo's point of view, even though in my heart I can't lie and be a little bit like it's just weird, to see a number after a Nintendo system, because I'm so used to PlayStation doing that, PlayStation 1, 2, 3 or whatever. And I always see people like, oh, why did they call it the Switch 2, blah 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 blah, that's stupid, that's weird, and in turn other people are like, what are you talking about, PlayStation does this all the time, why are you complaining? I think there's two people complaining, and I don't think they're listening to each other. I think that's the case for most arguments online. You see people complaining, and then another people complaining, and they don't listen to each other. The reason why they're complaining is because, again, it's just weird for Nintendo to do a number after the console. While with PlayStation, you're used to that. But if Nintendo does truly keep up with this, I don't think there's going to be a problem at all. I'm curious to see if, there will be Switches forever now. Like, is there going to be a Switch 10? I don't know. We'll see, I'm at least expecting a Switch 3 probably because of the number, but anything beyond that is a wild guess in my opinion. But again, plans could change. It could depend, mostly depends on how the system sells. If it starts really bad and it's still bad, the Switch 2, maybe they'll change their minds on a Switch 3. Or maybe they'll go out with a Switch 3 and try to change it up a little bit more, and if that doesn't work, then completely change it up, you know? But yeah, that's just my thoughts. Let me know if you guys think Nintendo is done with unique consoles or what, because it is weird, but at the same time it works for them. The Switch idea works for them. I don't think they should have changed it up, but I do think, you know, the numbering could have been a bit better, you know. But at the same time, if they're gonna keep the Switch theme throughout, at least for like a little while, it kind of makes sense to have numbers, because again, what do you call a third console? Super duper Switch, super Switch advanced? Like, what do you call it? You know, it's just kind of weird. Maybe Xbox could take some cues from PlayStation and now Nintendo with the numbering, because oh my god, Xbox has horrible console stuff. I mean, Xbox 360, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S. Like, oh my god, just call it Xbox 5 or something. Anyway, hopefully I made sense in this video, because I don't know if what I'm saying anymore makes any sense. But anyway, I think I'm done rambling. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, subscribe, turn on notifications, play some Xenoblade, and I'll catch you all next time for more. Peace. Bye, everyone.